Everybody, delighted to have you here. Today is Labinar number 2 for Advancing Mission Thrivability, and we're delighted to have you. But before we start, I'd like to introduce a poll question. We're going to get you working from the very get-go. So I'm going to turn it over to Abby Rowland. We'll introduce her in a moment if you haven't met her. But Abby, if you could introduce the first poll question.
Yes, so, okay, our first poll question. Nope, internet is some tech issues. Hello. Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm sorry, we're having had a few technical internet connection can always be fun during these events, but our first poll question is launched. It is, Thanksgiving is almost here. Which food do you love the least? So turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, yams with marshmallows and brown sugar, pumpkin pie, or none. They're all delicious. So Mike, Larry, and I's choices of our least favorites are all on here. So let's see how many of you are on our wavelength. All right, we've got most of the responses in. So we're going to go ahead and end the poll and share results. So few people said turkey. A lot of people don't like yams with marshmallows and brown sugar. That was Mike's least favorite. Yes. And a lot of people just love everything. So I'm sure you're looking forward to delicious food on Thursday.
All right. Thank you, Abby. Thanks to all of you for the responses to poll question number 1. We're all starting to get hungry for Thanksgiving, but we'll have to wait for just a couple of days. So let's get started. As I said, this is Labinar number 2 for Advancing Mission Thrivability. And for those of you who have been along with us for this journey, you know that we're really focused on conversation and framework for building a more mission-focused approach to your nonprofit's thrivability. To those of you who are newbies, who have not been with us for the previous webversation and Labinar, we welcome you to AMT. And again, for those of you who have continued along this journey, we're glad you're back. Before we start, again, this is a Labinar. A Labinar is a made-up word, courtesy of the Patterson Foundation. And what it is a combination of a learning lab. We'll offer the engagement and interactivity of it, along with the virtual education of a webinar. We do have a few ground rules, as we frequently do during these Zoom sessions, and I'm going to turn it back to Abby to share those with you briefly. Abby, are you there?
I am here. So a few ground rules. We're sure you're all familiar with these at this point, but just some reminders. All participants are muted at this point in time. Please feel free to share any questions or comments that you have in the chat box, and we'll make sure that we respond to as many as time permits. If we're not able to respond to your question, we'll be sure to follow up after. We will be recording this webinar, and it will be available on the Patterson Foundation website later on. And then just one more thing about the chat box. Make sure that you send your questions to panelists and attendees, so that way everyone can see them.
Okay, good. Thank you, Abby. And just a reminder to everyone, we will be using the Zoom polling feature throughout today's webinar. They will appear when you least expect them. So please join us and respond to each of them when they appear. So why are we here today? Well, we're here for a couple of reasons, but probably the most significant of which is to help strengthen you and your nonprofit's what we call mission-centric decision-making. And what we mean by that is we have a framework and an approach that we are sharing with you, and we're doing it really in two parts. So during the first Labinar, what we shared with you was the introduction to this framework to ensure that mission guides what you do, while at the same time looking at or considering economic impact. And that's really what we're going to talk about today, in addition to, once you understand kind of how to factor in economic impact, how do you bring it together with the mission component of the framework? So that's the rigor and the discipline that we're sharing with you, and hoping that you will bring to your own organization and the decision-making process. So we do have an action-packed hour for our agenda. We'll just briefly share a few introductions. We're going to offer up just a brief flashback to remind those of you who have been with us on this journey. And if you're new today, it will quickly help bring you up to speed. And then we'll focus on the decision-making framework, as I said before, talking about kind of the economic-centric component, and then bringing that together with the mission-centric part of this framework. And then we're going to talk about what's next. So just to give you insight and understanding about what's coming. Who's here today? Well, we had 42 people registered for today's Labinar. You consist of executive directors, CEOs, board members, and staff members. You hail from 29 different organizations in 4 different counties, different shapes, sizes, and a variety of different missions. So with that, our next poll question, Abby.
All righty, we'll see how well my internet connection can keep up with this. So our next poll question is, which Disney character best matches your organization's decision-making tendencies? So Winnie the Pooh, are you very thoughtful with the process, insightful? Is your mission upbeat and cheerful? Dory from Finding Nemo, are you optimistic, friendly? Maybe your mission is a little, or your decision-making tendencies can be a little forgetful though at times. Jafar, which, there tend to be immoral, maybe decision-making tendencies. Mary Poppins, very efficient decision-making, sensible, kind ways of making decisions. Jiminy Cricket, level-headed and wise decision-making. Or Peter Pan, kind of nonchalant and daring decision-making tendencies. So we've got a few ends coming in. They're coming in quickly. Glad to see that there aren't any Jafar, to be honest. We'll give everyone 5 more seconds to respond, and then we'll go ahead and end. All right, we'll end poll and share our results. Mike and Larry, any thoughts?
Well, it looks like Mary Poppins is the winner. Is that right?
That is correct.
Uh-huh. Well, that sounds like it's a good thing. We have Winnie the Pooh, it looks like, in 2nd place, and Dory, or Jiminy Cricket rather, in 3rd place. So we've got a lot of efficient decision makers here in the group. Thank you all for sharing. Okay. So by way of brief introduction, I think most of you know us, but again, if there's anybody new to today's Labinar, my name is Michael Oxman. I'm one of the managing partners in Principles in No Margin, No Mission, which is a national consulting practice. We've worked for a number of years in partnership with the Patterson Foundation to help nonprofits be more thrivable. I'll pass it over to my partner in crime to say hello.
Hello, everyone. I'm Larry Clark, the other managing partner in No Margin, No Mission, and welcome.
I have to say, this is the first time I've had a tie-on in several months, similar to that picture, although without my jacket today. So it feels good to be dressed up and sharing with all of you. We're also joined by our partners and colleagues and friends at the Patterson Foundation who are generously supporting this initiative, Advancing Mission Thrivability. With us today are Deborah Jacobs, President and CEO, Michael Corley, who's the Senior Consultant for Administration, Abby Rowland, who you've heard from, who is the third fellow at the Patterson Foundation. And also with us today is Josephine Eisenberg. She's on initiative support for AMT, and we certainly thank her and all of them for participating. I'm going to turn it over to Larry to walk us back for a little flashback.
Thanks, Mike. Let's think back the past couple of weeks. We spent a couple of hours with you. All of us agreed this isn't going away anytime soon. We're living in this pandemic, and you had to consider new realities as we move forward. You had to think about those what ifs. Most of you changed your budgets for this year and probably going into next year. And you had to make some decisions about deploying those financial resources and how to best do that. So it's like a roller coaster. I mean, we've spoken to many of you on one-on-ones over the past 6-8 months. And, you know, some weeks is great, and other weeks it's like, wow, I didn't see that coming. So you've had to make decisions all along the way. And again, it's like a roller coaster. There's highs and there's some low lows. So at the last Labinar, we did focus on kind of 3 phases that you've all gone through or are going through. You know, cope, adapt, and innovate. And we took a little poll at the last Labinar of which phase you're in. Most of you are in adapt and innovate. Some of you go back to cope and move through the whole thing again. But it's really in each one of those phases, you've had to make decisions along the way, whether they're economic centric or whether they're mission focus centric. And hopefully you've learned a few things and they will help you make decisions in the future. So it's a tsunami of decisions, as I've just said, and you don't have the luxury of time. Many of you have had to make decisions very, very quickly. And some of them include lots of people and others are just the executive director and maybe a board member making decisions. But hopefully every single decision you're making is making you stronger and more thrivable. So we worked you through mission-centric decision-making, and kind of mission is in the center of that. You surrounded yourself with programs, and this was part of your homework that you did over the past 2 weeks. So we looked at, if you had to cut $100,000 out of your budget using a mission-centric guide, how would you do that? What kind of thinking do you have going into it? And do you analyze your programs, your services, and your products? Analyze meaning, do you set goals and do you measure your goals as you move forward? And did you use those measurements to actually make some decisions along the way? And you make cuts if you had to cut $100,000 based on those goals, mission-centric goals. You did a couple of exercises. We had a handout for Cope, Adapt, and Innovate. Hopefully you've met together as a team and worked through that. We've actually got a couple sent in to us. Thank you, those organizations that have done that. And you also had a worksheet about mission-centric decision-making. And there were 3 steps: goal setting, inventory and ranking, and then information and analysis. And hopefully, as you walk through that process, thinking about your mission, that there were some aha moments along the way. And again, we provided you those 2 handouts for some homework and some meeting on your team time. So let's do another poll question. Abby?
Okay, just one. All right, so there we go. So what did your team do to follow up on the 2 assignments shared during Labinar number 1? Did you meet, discuss, and complete both? Did you meet, discuss, and start at least one? Did you have conversations but didn't have any movement on either assignment quite yet? Or nothing, other things emerged that required your attention, which is totally okay too. So we've got our answers coming in fast and furious. Got kind of a wide range here so far, which is good. give everyone a few more seconds to think about and about those answers. About 5 more seconds. Okay, so we'll go ahead and end poll and share results. So a pretty good mix. A lot of people have met, discussed, and completed both. So great job.
Yeah, and we also understand if you couldn't get together, there's a lot going on over the past 2 weeks, but hopefully you will take the time to sit down with your team and get a chance to work through some of the work. But thank you for doing that. And most of you are at least having the conversations or meeting and talking about it. So thank you for that. Mike?
Good. Well, let's keep moving. So we're going to dive into the topic at hand. And what we're going to talk about now is the second part of our decision-making framework, which we're calling making decisions through an economic informed lens. And we'd like to introduce this by just sharing a sort of a decision-making thought process that frequently happens in organizations that may be in crisis mode, that may be particularly challenged because of what's happening around them, not unlike what has happened as part of this pandemic. So here's what happens. You identify the need to reduce your budget, and let's just say it's by $100,000. And what happens is that when you are in a challenging time, a crisis time, you may be in the cope phase of a cope, adapt, and innovate, or you may be in the adapt phase or even in the innovate phase. You may find yourselves using dollars to guide your decision making. We need to cut $100,000. So we're going to just go right into our budget line items and we're going to just start cutting. And in this case, we're going to cut marketing, we're going to cut communications, we're going to eliminate costly programs or services, or we're going to reduce staff and consultant salaries. And again, the idea here is that you're looking to just get rid of dollars. So you may very well do that, but by using only dollars and cents as your guide, the question becomes, are you really doing what's in the best interest of the organization? So with that, let's focus on economic informed decision making. And we do ask that you please pay close attention as we share about this, because this will be one of your assignments following today's webinar. So we've got a step-by-step here. And what we'd like to do is to say, step number 1 is to start with your budget. So look at your most recent 12-month projected operating budget. So if you're on a calendar year, you could, in theory, use either last year's budget, or since we're so close to the end of the year, you could use this year's. If it's a fiscal year budget, pull out whatever was the 12-month projected operating budget. Then what we would like you to do is to look back to say, what were your financial goals that you had in place for those 12 months? And depending on your organization and the way that you do your financials or your goal setting, you may have very clear goals that you identified, or they may be a little bit more informal. But whatever the case, take a good look at what your financial goals were that you had in place. And then what we'd like you to do is to say, all right, well, if you know what your operating budget was for the 12 months and you know what your goals were, we'd like you to really understand, how did you do against those goals? What did you specifically achieve against them? Okay? So you're going to have to go back and look at some information related to your financials. So now, once you've done that, step number 2 is to do a bit of an inventory. And by inventory, we mean to look specifically at your programs, your services, and your products, and identify them individually. You may have them as line items or not. If you don't, you may have to do some information gathering, but go back to your list of programs, services, and products. And what we'd like you to do is to order them from high to low in terms of their return or their financial return. And what we mean by that is for each program, product, or service, what revenue did they generate minus expense? So doing that for each one. And you do this based on what you know or what you think for your most recent 12-month year-end financials. So again, each program, product, and service, look at what revenue was generated from it, less expense, so that you have an understanding of what it generated in terms of return. Okay, so once you've done that, we've got our friend Alexander Miles Thrivemore here to point out to us the but. And the but is, and this is a big one, financials don't always tell the real story. And we have learned over time, in some cases working with some of you or with other organizations that we've worked with over time, that in many nonprofits, that actual costs may not be fully allocated to programs, services, and products. Why? Well, you may not be doing it that way. You may be allocating expenses to the overall agency. You may be allocating them to other things, or you may be allocating some of them to certain programs, services, and products, and out of convenience, just not including them against a specific program, product, or service. Okay, so we're going to stop for a moment, and we're going to go to another poll question, and I'm going to ask Abby to share that.
Okay, so our next poll question involves tracking expenses. So does your organization track expenses and allocate them to individual programs, services, and products? Yes, absolutely. Always? Yeah, kinda. Some items are lumped together and others are separate. Nah, not really. We track broadly by area, but not specific items. Or that's a good question, I need to find out. So you've got two answers coming in again, fast and furious. Oh, one person has, a couple people have answered, nah, not really, but the majority are the two answers above. We'll give everyone probably 10 more seconds to share their thoughts on that one. Couple more slowly coming in. All righty. Go ahead and end poll and share results. So the vast majority of you, 68%, said yes, you absolutely always track your expenses and allocate them to individual programs, services, and products. Any thoughts, Mike and Larry, on that?
Well, that is good news. We certainly like to see the yes, absolutely, always. And the yeah, kind ofs, we're not surprised when we see those. Oftentimes when organizations do tell us the yes, absolutely, always, we do find as we dive in and dig a bit more that many of them fall into the yeah, kinda. And we'll talk about that more as we keep going. So Abby, thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Larry to continue this decision-making framework.
Thanks, Mike. And Bob, I know you asked a question about why not just increase income, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So thank you for the question. So let's continue this thought process about decision-making using an economic-centric lens. So this is going to be part of your homework. So we want you to identify your total revenue and expenses by program, services, and product for the most recent 12 months, as Mike said. And so you'll have your whole list of the most revenue-generating product to the least revenue-generating product. And then we want you to use that information above to calculate the net profit, which is the revenue minus expenses for each of those programs, services, and products. So what are all of our revenue and what's all the expense against those, and which ones maybe had the highest rate of return? And again, this is just using an economic centric lens. So let's use the gala as an example, and most of you have those. In this case, the gala was at the bottom of their list when they first did it at program number 3. They generated $75,000 in revenue, and that included all the tickets, all the sponsors, all the donations, any auction items, and other ways that they might have generated money for the gala. And then they looked at their actual expenses. So their actual expenses were $65,000. And this included their staff time, the venue, the food, the bar, the entertainment, the printing, the overhead. And Mike and I have worked with so many organizations in the greater Sarasota area. And when we ask the question about gala, and we say, give us the number that you allocated for staff expenses through this, a lot of organizations, they don't track their staff time. It's kind of an aha moment for them. So just in the chat box, do you track staff time against your annual events? Could you just write yes, no, maybe, sometimes? Great. I see some yeses. All right. So their net return was $10,000. So they actually made $10,000 on this. So on the next slide, Mike, they actually moved it up in their economic kind of list here because they actually made more money than they thought that they were going to make, which was good. And they reprioritized that of fact versus gut.
Larry, we have a question,
Sure.
which I'm just going to share. It says, what about the overhead indirect expenses allocated to programs, which can really skew financial performance of an individual program? These are real costs for support / space without revenue attached.
We usually try to attach an overhead rate to every single program, product, or service that you're doing. You have to pay for your overhead some way. And so one way is to how do you split it out, and a percentage goes to every single activity. You might have a donor or somebody who comes in and covers a big piece of your overhead, which would reduce that. But we would still like to see overhead calculated into your annual event, your gala.
Okay. Larry, I'm going to go on to the next slide.
Sure. So effective economic informed decision-making, the goal is to calculate every single dollar coming in for every program and every single expense going out. So that's how you kind of look at those, you prioritize those, and you move it forward and make some decisions around it, hopefully. Abby? Poll
Okay.
question.
Yes, so we have another poll question about your gala. So we'll go ahead and launch that. So if your organization hosts that annual gala, how would you describe the return generated from the event? Is it highly profitable, marginally profitable, break even? Let's not talk about it. Who could possibly keep track? Or good question, I need to find out. So we've got people coming in, some answers. It's nice to see after learning about how to measure these. A lot of people think highly and marginally profitable. That's good. Let's see. All right, keep them coming. So maybe some people thinking about the question. Wondering where it kind of fits in, what kind of a return it might have.
Good question, good answers. In your chat box, just for a second, write down, if you did a gala this year, which was virtual, did you make more money, the same amount of money, or less money if you did a virtual one? Just type it in.
Looks like, okay.
Less. Okay. So less money, but I'm still wondering if your return was higher, more. So it just depends. Okay, thank you. Mike?
Okay, let's move on. So we've talked about decision-making through a mission-centric lens, and we did that during Labinar number 1. Today, we've introduced the second part of that, which is adding an economic-informed lens to your decision-making. And what we'd like to do now is to bring those two together so that as you're thinking about decision-making going forward, how do you make those decisions by considering both the mission-centric and the economic-informed lens together, so that your decision-making is really guided by an understanding of both. And as you think about that, we like to show this visual side by side of both the mission side of this framework with all of your programs, products, and services that are underneath that, that mission piece, and hopefully prioritized based on which of those generated the greatest mission impact or return for your organization. And then add to that this economic impact analysis that we just walked you through by program, service, and product, and really understanding what the return was, the financial return, so that revenue less expense for each of those programs, products, and services. And then what we would like to ask you to do, and again, we're showing this visually, is to take each one of those programs, services, and products that you have done this analysis on, and to assign each one as high, medium, or low impact. So on the mission side, if your product, program, or service delivered above goal in terms of your mission, that would get the high mission impact. If it was at goal, it would be designated as the medium mission impact. And if it was below goal, then it would be low mission impact. And similarly, on the economic side, to do that same thing. Again, once you've gone through that analysis of looking at the financial return, revenue less expense, you would then say which of those performed above your financial goals or targets, and that would get a high revenue designation. Which ones performed at goal or close to that goal, that would get a medium return designation. And anything that fell below goal in terms of the financial return would be designated as low or no return. Okay, so again, we're trying to help you think about this in a way that applies this sort of rigor and discipline to the decision-making framework. Now, another thing we'd like to introduce here, and I'll share this in a moment, but step 3 is to then plot each program, service, and product on what we call our mission and return matrix. For those organizations that have worked with us and the Patterson Foundation as part of Margin and Mission Ignition, you are familiar with this framework and grid. If you have not, it is a wonderful tool, and let me just explain it briefly. Very simple. You've got 4 quadrants, as you can see here. In the top left corner is the high mission low return, low financial return box. And as you can see here, it's got a big heart. So a lot of nonprofits are doing programs, products, and services here that deliver high mission, but probably low-ish return. On the opposite side of that matrix, you can see this low mission, high return with the dollar sign in it. And some organizations, some of you may be doing this. They're bringing in a lot of dollars, but they're not doing a lot for mission. Where you would hope to have a fair amount of programs, products, and services would be in this smiley face box called high mission, high return. So are those programs, products, and services delivering well on both mission and financial return? And where you likely do not want to have too many programs, products, and services are in this zone called low mission, low return. And if you haven't thought about those, the products, programs, and services that you have that fall in that quadrant, now may be the time to think about that seriously. You're doing it because you've always done it, but it's not doing much for the organization. We would say jettison that and get rid of it, but we'll talk more about that in a moment. Okay, so see, Larry, I'm going to turn it back to you to keep the conversation going with an example.
Great, thanks, Mike. So let's go back to the first lab. And the first lab, I used Meals on Wheels as an example. So let's continue the Meals on Wheels. They have a gala every year. This year, they wanted to have 200 people attend. They actually got 300 people to attend. So the revenue number should be higher, right? If they had that many people, and they wanted $10,000 in a profit margin after all their expenses, which I shared earlier, but their donors, their sponsors didn't come in quite what they wanted. So they still had a $10,000 profit margin, even though they had more people attend. So Mike, can you move? Good. So their gala goes high mission. They reached 100 more people than they hopefully reached, and it generated $10,000 in revenue. So it's up there on the return side. So they have a lot of other programs though. They have a meal distribution program, a curriculum, room rental, because they have a good space that they rent a room. They have training, they have an online store, and they do some nutrition counseling. So their next task was, how do we fit all of these then in the margin mission matrix? So it's looking at how many people did we reach, and what was that mission impact, and what was our economic goal that we set for ourselves. And when they plot those, this is what it looks like. So don't, wait a second, Mike, to move it forward, okay? So this is how it plots. So you see at the bottom right, you have room rental. It's really low mission, but they might have made some money in it. They have curriculum and online store, kind of low mission, low return. Meal distribution, high mission, maybe they broke even, or maybe they have to do a bit more fundraising for that. You saw where the gala was, and then they're actually making some money and high mission impact in training and counseling. So in the chat box, if you were going to either reduce or cut back a program or two, which programs would you look at? Just take a second and write it down in the chat box. If you're going to put something on hold or stop it this year based on both economic and mission-centric decision-making, which ones would it be? Anybody? Okay, I see room rental, fundraiser, online store, okay. There's a few. So Mike, do you want to move to the next slide? So if we're looking at this, and if you're trying to make some decisions here, probably the curriculum in the online store might be the ones that you either put on hold or you stop doing, or you move them out to a different organization. Maybe they could do better at them. Room rental, you might be making some money there, even though it's low mission, it might be generating some money that you could keep. But definitely the curriculum in the online store would be two of your programs, products, or services you might consider either pulling back on or moving out. And now think about which ones do you think might have the greatest potential for a high mission and high margin, and might click to it. It's the meal distribution and the gala and training and counseling. So what we like to think of is meal distribution and gala. How can we make them more profitable going into the next year or a next budget cycle? Because they're already delivering a high mission, but how can you generate some more revenue out of that? Whether it's, a different type of fundraising or a different type of, registration amount, or maybe getting a contract from an agency for meal distribution. And if training and counseling is already doing really well, how do you make it even better? And most of the time we do that through business planning. How do we think about taking that training and counseling to a whole different level? So, Mike? So before we move on, it's really about taking all of your programs, products, and services and thinking about how do you map them so you can make better decisions as you move forward. So let's move on to the next poll question. Abby?
Okay, so the poll question kind of reflects what Larry just said. So thinking about your collective programs, services, and products, how would you characterize them as a whole? Are they heavy on delivering mission impact? Are they heavy on generating revenue? Are they perfectly balanced? They deliver mission impact and drive revenue? Neither? Are they unfortunately light on both? Or have you maybe never considered that before, but you will in the future? So answers coming in fast and furious again. Thank you all. Looks like there are two choices that are the strongest or the most respondents so far. Let's see, a lot of focus on mission impact, which is good. And then some that are perfectly balanced. We'll wait 5 more seconds.
We're actually very happy. Nobody clicked that never considered that before, but yeah.
All right, we'll go ahead and end and share the results. So the slight majority on heavy on delivering mission impact, and then a strong second of the perfectly balanced, which is good to see.
That's awesome. What we have found too is throughout the last 8 or 9 months during the pandemic, you might have been leaning more towards the economic-centric decision-making, and now you're becoming a bit more balanced looking at missions. So hopefully that's the case. And we're so happy to see at least 15 of your organizations chose that one. So thank you. Mike.
Before we move on, we do have, I noticed there's another question. It says, if programs are funded by donations not designated for any specific program, how do you decide the revenue per program? If programs are funded by donations not designated for any specific program, how do you decide the revenue per program?
So, want me to take a crack at that,
Yeah,
Mike?
go ahead.
Okay. So when you put your budget together and you have that program, you have a revenue and expense budget for it. So you set that number prior to your board approving the budget for implementation. So you've already decided that you're going to have to fundraise, $400,000, which will be split out over 4 programs. But that program already had a revenue line item designated to it. So you've set that up prior to the budget being approved in most cases. So I guess that's how we're thinking about it, that it is part of your budget. You've already decided the revenue number, and hopefully you can meet it and maybe go beyond that, but you've set it in your budget.
Okay, good. Well, let's keep moving. And if we can, we'd like to shift focus. Again, we've shared both the mission and economic lenses for what we believe is effective decision-making. And having done that, what we'd like to do is to share with you your assignment. So if you would please work on the 2 exercises with your team. So the first one being the economic deformed decision-making through that 3-step process, which includes looking at your mission, your goals, your results, doing that inventory and ranking of your programs, products, and services based on mission, goals, and results, and then adding to that the information, the analysis that you have that would help you to, to rank order those. And then secondly, to work on this mission, this mission and return matrix that we just shared with you. So plotting each of your various programs, services, and products in the quadrants of that matrix. We do have worksheets to help you do this, which we will be providing to you. You will get them following today's Labinar when an email comes for you to register for Webversation number 2. So please be on the lookout for those worksheets that you will be able to either work from on your computer or print out as a hard copy and work on. But we do encourage you to do it together as a team, because this makes for very helpful discussions that will inform your decision-making moving forward.
Mike?
Yes.
Can I just share one thing on that?
Sure.
Side? So Mike and I work with lots of different organizations, and we always use the mission and return matrix. And what we find is almost 100% of the organizations have something in that lower left quadrant, which is low mission, low margin. So if you find after you've gone through this process that you have things in that lower right quadrant, you have to ask yourselves, why are you still doing them? And in some cases, it's because it was a board member's idea. In some cases, we have staff salaries dependent on that, their jobs dependent on that. In some cases, it was a staff member's idea, or you've just always done it. And so you think you always have to keep doing it. Well, we challenge you to look at those programs especially, and to say, is it time to move these on or to do something different with them? So just challenge you around that.
Good, thanks, Larry. So we'd also like to suggest a couple of other action steps after today's Labinar. One is, we know that many of you are on today's session as an individual, or perhaps, there's 2 of you from your organization. If that's the case, take this back. Take these tools, these things we've shared today, and share them. Share the information, share the thinking, and share those exercises internally with a broader team. And one thing to keep in mind is that you can use this framework to guide a number of different things. So board education, we've learned, is a great thing. So how do you share this to bring your board along to use for better, more effective, and more strategic decision-making? And then also, as you're looking ahead, this framework can be used for effective planning and management and oversight within your organizations. So something just to keep in mind, we do believe you're going to get a lot of mileage out of this framework if you use it in ways that can really be helpful within your organization. So when we said at the very beginning of today's Labinar what we were hoping to accomplish, we just want to make sure we did. This Labinar today was a continuation to help you strengthen your mission-centric and economic-informed decision-making, ensuring that mission guides what you do, and at the same time, considering the economic impact for your programs, products, and services, and applying that rigor and discipline to the decision-making process as you move forward. So, Larry, is this you or is this me?
It is you.
This is me. So what's next? There is more to come. Our Webversation number 2 will take place next week on Thursday, December 3rd. So we hope you will join us for that. It's going to be the same time, 11 to 12 Eastern. And the title for that Webversation is, importantly, How to Be Considered for Consulting Support from No Margin, No Mission. And again, that's for those organizations that want to continue to delve deeper into this decision-making framework through consulting support. But until then, work on those 2 exercises with your team. We urge you to begin that process now. Please come with your questions to the Webversation on Thursday. And if you have questions or comments prior to the Webversation, email them to us because we will collect those and walk through them during the Webversation. That session will be a combination of us sharing with you about how to keep moving forward if you're so inclined, but also we'll open it up for Q&A and to share with folks who are on that session. When we talk about this consulting support from No Margin, No Mission, please keep in mind that this will be open to those organizations who really have demonstrated interest and readiness to delve deeper into the topic. And also, as we've encouraged you and your team to participate fully in these sessions, consideration will be given to those that have really fully participated. So stay tuned for more information about the consulting part of AMT as we move forward. At this point, what I'd like to do is, and then also one more thing. We do have the registration, as I had referenced earlier, that you're all going to receive today or this afternoon. So please be on the lookout for that. You're going to get an email. It will be to register for Webversation number 2. It'll also have the attachments for the worksheets in it. And once you've done that, you'll receive a separate Zoom link to participate in next Thursday's session. But again, remember, you do have to register to participate in next Thursday's Webversation. So with that, I know we have a few minutes, and what I'd like to do is to ask, first of all, are there any questions in the chat box that we have not answered or addressed? And we're happy to answer those now. Or if any of you have questions that you would like to ask, please feel free to just type them in the chat box now. And we'll spend a few minutes just discussing those.
Mike, there is one question or a comment more. It goes, the revenues in the budget are most likely set by how much in donations, grants, et cetera, was raised the previous year plus inflation, not by how much each program, service, or product raised in revenue. So that's more of a comment. I guess I'll take a crack at that. You know, if you're looking at donations and grants, you know, you probably look at an inflation number that you add to that. But if you have earned income, you really need to think about the dollars that will be coming in that current year. So whether you have a contract with a state or federal agency to do work, whether you have a contract with another entity, whether you actually have a sale of a service, you actually look at your current fiscal year and you're utilizing the revenue that year. So I guess it just depends on how you approach your budget. We think about it more from an earned income side than a strictly donations and grants side.
Larry, we have a comment from Janet Watermeyer at Visual Arts Center of Punta Gorda. She said, for those of you who haven't used the margin mission chart or matrix, we have found it to be one of our most valuable tools, and we do use it for each new program that we consider. So yes, Janet, thank you for sharing that. That little tool, we have learned over the years, is extremely valuable, as you've said, for a number of reasons. And we found that many executive directors, CEOs, board members, staff members actually print that matrix out. They keep it in front of them continuously. And as any opportunity, idea, comes across their desk, they consider it within that matrix and that framework. And obviously, certainly for decision making, because it really helps to think about how you move something forward based on both mission and margin, or financial return, I should say. So yes, that's a good point.
I just wanted to add to that. It's also, from an executive director or a chair of the board standpoint, it's a good thing to have at every board meeting. Sometimes you can be blindsided at board meetings by board members wanting to do something and all of them somehow very quickly go along. But if you bring that up, at least there can be a good discussion about where does this fit on the matrix, and is it worth it to invest in whatever that idea might be. So.
Good. Does anybody else have any parting questions, comments, or thoughts? If yes, type them in the chat box. If no, again, we just urge each of you to use this framework. The wonderful thing about it is you can start using it today. And while to many of you, it may seem, or various components of this may seem obvious, until you actually sit down and go through and apply the rigor and the discipline, both on the mission, the margin, and then combining them together, you don't always get the full benefit of it until you've done that. So we can't say enough good things about this process. It's very, very helpful. So with that, I'll flip to our last slide here. You can see that Alexander Miles Thrivemore does show up in the craziest places. This time he's in Turkey to wish all of you a happy and healthy and joyful Thanksgiving. We know Thanksgiving is going to be a little different this year, but nonetheless, we can all give thanks, in so many different ways. So we're thankful for all of you. We look forward to seeing you next Thursday at Webversation number 2. And with that, we'll adjourn and say goodbye. We'll see you all.
Bye, everybody.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.